Good evening and welcome all. I, Doipan Mitro, Assistant Professor of English at Lalgarh Government College, welcome you to this online lecture series, especially designed for our second, fourth, and sixth semester English honors students. Today we will have a special discussion on William Congreve's play The Way of the World, and the lecture will be delivered by Professor Mrityunjoy Samanto, Assistant Professor in English at Maharaja Nandakumar Mahavidyalaya. He will deliver a special lecture on Congreve's play The Way of the World. The Way of the World is a comedy of manners that throws a flood of light on the fashionable 18th century society. And this is a very complicated play, I would say, because there are so many nuances in the plot lines of this text and there are so many loopholes at the same time. But it is a very enjoyable text, and I hope this lecture will be immensely beneficial for our students. Before going into the lecture, I would request our YC sir, Professor Vishesha Chakraborty, who will deliver a welcome note and will formally introduce our guest speaker, Professor Mrityunjoy Samanto. Sir, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Doipayan. I thank you first, my friend Mrityunjoy, for being able to find a time to deliver a talk on the way of the world. He is now serving as an assistant professor in English uh, at Maharaja Nandakumar Mahavidyalaya, which is situated in Purva Medinipur. And he has a vast experience of teaching. Not only that he is now teaching at Nanda Kumar, but before that he has served many colleges in the capacity of guest teachers and in as part-time teachers like us, as we have done in our struggling days. We both have been very close. So I am very happy to see him and very happy that he is delivering a talk today. Besides that, he has also published many writings. He has presented papers in seminar. We also uh, presented seminar together in a particular seminar in Vidyasagar University. And he is a very good and friendly person whom he, with whom you can interact very easily. Okay, so without much without much ado, I would like to welcome Mrityunjoy. I would like to thank him, and I also would like to thank my students for being able to join at this evening session for our lecture series, which we have designed, as I usually tell you, that this lecture series is being designed and conducted by us because so that you can have a better glimpse, a vaster glimpse of a particular text and the themes and the contexts that are associated with it, which would help you not only in your examination related issues but also in future times. So with these few words, I welcome again Mrityunjoy and my students and other participants, and request him to begin the session. Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks to Professor Doipan Misro and my friend, officer in charge of Lalgarh Government College. And I also convey my thanks to everyone who are actually behind this kind of project that is organizing the lecture series, online lecture series. And I also thank my friend and Doipan, Professor Doipan Misro, for
Mitro.
inviting me to give a kind of
Doipan Mitro.
lecture. Doipan Misro.
Mitro.
Misro, sorry,
Bondhu. Mitro.
I thought it was to be Misro. Sorry. Uh, I thank everyone for inviting me uh, for delivering a lecture on the way of the world by William Congreve. So thank you again to all concerned who are instrumental in organizing this kind of lecture series. So may I start now?
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Yes,
Kindly.
yes, sure.
Thank you. So taking cue from uh, the introductory speech given, am I audible to you all?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes, স্টুডেন্টরা শুনতে পাচ্ছো?
Can you all hear
Yes,
me?
sir.
ওকে 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 ওকে
Okay, thank you, thank you,
আনমিউট
thank you. So just Professor Doipayan Mitro just a moment ago said that the way of the world is a play which has a kind of complex background, and I also confess that the first reading when I was a student, my first reading of the text is not a comfortable one, or was not a comfortable one, because actually the world that has been represented in this play is a complex one, and comedy of manners, this kind of drama itself is a bit complex. But I think uh, complexities are there, but this play also can well be understood. So I'm trying to actually trying sincerely to make my students understand the central motive of this play. That's why I have actually thought to discuss that particular drama uh, stepwise. That means I want to actually give a kind of deliberation uh, on the. I want to start from the origin of English drama. Then stepwise, I want to move on to the discussion of that particular drama. That means I want to actually say something at first about the origin of British drama, then its movement uh, up to the time of William Congreve. Okay, so I would like to ask my students one question at first. Do you know exactly the time and the form of drama actually with which British drama had its origin and then its development? Can any one of you tell me the origin of English drama, or when did it actually take place? I'm telling you. So before the discussion of Congreve's play The Way of the World, actually that was published in 1700. I would like to have a kind of glimpse, inkling into the origin and growth of British drama. For your kind information, I would like to say that British drama has its history of origin with the Norman conquest. Okay, so Norman conquest, you know the year of the Norman conquest, that was in 1066. So by the time a kind of religious, or you can say a kind of liturgical drama established itself in France, and it was brought to England with the Normans. Okay, when the Norman lords came over to England, they also brought with them a kind of liturgical or religious play. So those plays were didactic in nature and basically written in Latin. So these early plays were written to instruct the common people about the Christian religion. So those plays, actually, English drama had its origin, had its birth, had its origin with the mystery or miracle plays. You know, perhaps you are acquainted with those words, mystery or miracle plays. So the earliest form of British drama was in the form of miracle play. Actually, in England, there was a model, that is Ludus de Sancta Catharian. It was performed at Dunstable about 1110 AD. So think of the time, almost at in the first decade of the 12th century. So along with miracle plays, there are also some other kinds of plays, that is morality plays and interludes. So morality plays, perhaps you have heard the name of Everyman, The Castle of Perseverance, Mankind, and several other plays. So morality plays actually flourished during the 1400 to 1600 years. Okay, so it is a kind of morality plays where it was a kind of dramatic allegory on the representative Christian life. So they were basically in the form of dramatic allegories. So the first form of dramatic literature actually we have in the form of mystery plays or miracle plays and morality plays. They were the earliest forms of plays in England written in English. Another form of drama was interlude, and you have perhaps heard the name of John Heywood's 4PP or 4 Ps. So that was the first stage of dramatic output uh, in British literature, in case of British literature. So once again, I'm telling you, miracle plays or mystery plays, actually, they are chiefly concerned with the representations of the lives of the saints, and the scenes of those plays were taken from the lives of Christ and the stories from the Old Testament, etc., etc. And the morality plays, they were dramatized allegories, and they represented the Christian way of life. And the basic plot was concerned with the temptation, sinning, and salvation of a common man, of a common figure, who is called Everyman. So we have Everyman, the Castle of Perseverance, Wisdom, Mankind, etc., etc., in the form of morality plays. So another kind of drama was also there, that is interlude, and John Heywood's 4 Ps or 4PP, that was published in 1554. So after that phase, that is the first phase of British drama, and next we have a galaxy of dramatists, playwrights, whom basically we know as the university wits. Actually, you know the names, I think: Lilly, Pilly, Green, Lodge, Nash, Keat, and the most powerful, Christopher Marlowe. So Marlowe's play you have read, I think, that is Edward II. Actually, it was given to you, it was there in your syllabus, but it was cut later at the time of COVID-19 for making the syllabus short. So in the second phase of British drama, we are having in the university wits. Okay, so they were chiefly concerned with the problems and issues of the contemporary society. That is the Renaissance time. Okay, so that is the second phase in the growth of British drama. So I'm not going to discuss the dramatists in greater details. Just I am alluding to them, just to understand, have a kind of grasp of the flow of the growth of British drama. So that was the second phase, and in the third phase we are having uh, a playwright who is a class by himself. That is William Shakespeare. Okay, so we are having Shakespeare in the third phase. Shakespeare is a class by himself, and he composed as many as 37 plays, comprising tragedies, comedies, tragicomedies, problem play, history play, etc., etc. So, university wits. After the university wits, we have Shakespeare. So, the university wits may also be called as a pre-Shakespearean dramatists, though Christopher Marlowe and Shakespeare, they are supposed to be, or they were supposed to be contemporaries, because some of the critics think that Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe, they were friends and rivals. Okay, so and another thing that is most important, Marlowe was born in 1564, the same year Shakespeare was born. So you can say they were contemporaries and rivals. And basically, the literary historians put Marlowe uh, in the group of the university wits. So after Shakespeare, actually Shakespeare actually stopped his writing in 1613, I think. In 1613, Shakespeare stopped writing. After that, actually he died in 1616. So 3 years before his death, he closed writing. He was not concerned with the stage clouds, that is dramatic performances or drama or other composition of any kind of drama. He stopped writing in 1613. So after Shakespeare, so Shakespeare comes in the third phase, and after Shakespeare, actually, we have another group of writers who are generally called the post-Shakespearean dramatists. Actually, some of them, chronologically, if we see it chronologically, then some of them are Jacobean dramatists and some of them are Caroline dramatists. So we have Beaumont, Fletcher, Marston, Messenger, Webster, Cyril Turner, Thomas Dekker, and Ben Jonson. They are basically called the post-Shakespearean dramatists, and you have also you also know that there is a kind of criticism that drama massively declined after Shakespeare. So Shakespeare's kind of genius was not perhaps found in that period. So drama was supposed to have a kind of decline in the post-Shakespearean period. So that is a kind of debatable issue. Just follow the sequence. So there is drama began with the miracle plays, morality plays, interludes. Then in the next page we have university plays. Then we have Shakespeare. Then we have the post-Shakespearean dramatists. So this time is important. Actually, some of the post-Shakespearean dramatists have contributed enough to the growth of a kind of drama which later is called the comedy of manners. That is, among the post-Shakespearean dramatists, we have Ben Jonson. Ben Jonson is also sometimes called Shakespeare's friend, and he is also maybe called his rival. Okay, so Ben Jonson, perhaps his famous comedy, Volpone, The Alchemist. So these are everyone in his humor, everyone out of his humor. These are the plays. So Ben Jonson wrote a kind of comedy that is called the comedy of humors. Comedy of humors. So comedy of humors, humor involves a kind of medieval medieval idea. Actually, there was a concept of humors in medieval times. Actually, we have the concept of 4 humors in medieval philosophy and medieval physiognomy. So there are 4 kinds. In European philosophy, there are 4 types of humors of which human body is made of: blood, choler, flame, melancholy, etc., etc. So ultimately, pick up the point, Ben Jonson wrote a kind of comedy that is called comedy of humors. Okay, satiric elements were there, comic scenes were there, and sometimes caustic satire was also there. So Ben Jonson started writing comedy of humors. Just pick up that point, and for future reference, you have to bear in your memory, in your mind, the particular concept of comedy of humors. Now, after that, after the post-Shakespearean dramatist, what happens? I am going back to the socio-political context. Actually, I am speaking of, now I am to speak of the 4th and towards the middle of the 16th century. So what happens towards the middle of the 16th century in the political arena in England? So I am reminding you that in 1642, the year is also very important, and for understanding the Restoration comedy or Congreve's plays or the plays of other contemporary writers, this socio-political, the political background is very important. So what happens in 1642 is that there was the rise of civil war in England. Okay, there was a rise of civil war in England in 1642. That means common people. What is civil war? Civil war is something that common people, uh, the common people rise in rebellion against the authority, against the king. So when the common people, the mass, actually rebel against the authority, against the king, uh, against the ruler, then it is basically conceived as the civil war. So in 1642, there was a civil war in England. So behind the organization, behind the rebellion, uh, there were the common people and the Protestant supporters and anti-royalists. And there were also the extremist sect of the Protestant, that is the Puritans. The Puritans were also against the monarchy. So it was a kind of rebellion against the monarch. So who was there on the throne of England in 1642? Can you tell me, my students, my dear students, can you tell me the name of the king who was there on the throne of England at the time in 1642? From 1558 to 1603, it is the reign of Queen Elizabeth, and from 1603 to 1625, it is the reign of I think James the First, and 1625 to 1649, it is the reign of Charles the First. Okay, Charles the First. So Charles the First was on the throne of England at the time. So the civil war rose in England in 1642, and the war, the rebellion continued for almost 7 years. So it was in 1649 that Charles the First, who was the king then, who was the monarch. Okay, Charles the First was caught, he was tried, and he was beheaded. Okay, B of his head. That means he was given the death sentence, he was beheaded. So with the beheading ceremony, with the beheading event, the monarchic rule in England ceased to exist. So there was, after that, after 1649, there was no king on the throne of England. So with the death of, with the punishment of, with the beheading of Charles the First, Charles the Second, that means Charles the First brother, actually out of fear for his life, actually fled to France with a band of courtiers, with a group of courtiers, retinues. He crossed the English Channel and reached France for taking shelter. So Charles II fled to France. So what happened in England? The monarchic rule was put to an end. There was no king on the throne of England. And another thing, just I must tell you, is that in September 2nd September 1642, what happened? The Puritans actually imposed a kind of ban on the dramatic performances, on stage performances. The Puritans were against the monarchic rule. So the Puritans, they actually preached themselves to be highly moralistic in their attitude. So what the Puritans did was that they put a kind of ban, they imposed a kind of ban on any kind of mimetic literature on the stage. So drama is a kind of mimetic literature, mimetic form of literature. It is based basically on the form of imitation. So it's a kind of imitative art. So when the Puritans imposed a kind of ban on the dramatic performances, so the stage, the dramatist actually, there was no performance of any drama on the British stage. So you can say that dramatic performances were stopped. Clear? And in that way, time passed by, and there was the rule of Oliver Cromwell. Actually, after the when the monarchic rule was over, in 1649, there was the formation of Commonwealth government, or you can say there was the Puritan interregnum. That means the Commonwealth government was formed after the suggestion of the monarchic rule. So from 1649 to 1660, actually very often we use the word restoration. So the meaning of that exact word restoration must be cleared. You must have a kind of sound idea about what restoration actually means. So when the monarchy rule was over, there was the rule of the government led by Oliver Cromwell. Actually, Oliver Cromwell was the leader of that government, that is the Commonwealth government. So he was the Lord Protector. His title is called he was called the Lord Protector of that government. So what happened in 1658? In 1658, Oliver Cromwell died. Oliver Cromwell passed. Now, there was a kind of great dissension, great disagreement among the leaders of that government. So who would be the next Lord Protector, next leader of that government? So regarding that particular issue, there was a kind of great quarrel, great dissension. No fixed decision was there. So they could not settle upon that matter. So in that way, almost a couple of years, almost 2 years passed by. And what happened in 1660? In 1660, some of the leaders of that government, actually the leaders who deposed the king of England, who actually executed Charles I, who beheaded Charles I. So the same leaders thought that the monarchic rule should be restored. So some of the leaders from Ireland actually invited Charles II, who, for the fear of his life, was living in France. They invited Charles II to come back to England and occupy the throne. So, with the band of courtiers, Charles II comes back from France to England and takes up the throne. So, the king is brought back to his own position, that means monarchy was restored. This particular event in political history is called the restoration of monarchy. There was the rule of the king, but for 11 years there was no king on the throne of England. Again, the king is restored, so this is called the restoration of monarchy. So now, what is the relation of the restoration of the king to the throne with the restoration comedy of manners? So let us have a kind of discussion on that particular issue. So when monarchy was restored, the king was brought back to his throne. Drama or British drama or dramatic performances which was stopped since 1642, since the imposition on the dramatic performances by the Puritans. British drama started languishing. Okay, there was no dramatic performance, but with the restoration of monarchy, when the king came back to the throne of England, Charles II came back to the throne of England, he again ordered that dramatic performances would start afresh. So he orders the dramatist to uh, mm, uh, what to say, um, bring back the old tradition of the previous tradition of dramatic performances um, to the British stage. So drama should be written and performed um, from now on. So he gave that kind of order. So dramatic performances started again. So along with the restoration of monarchy, there was also the restoration of dramatic performances, both in the field of tragedy. Both tragedies and comedies were written. So the comedies are basically called the restoration comedies, and later you should know that they are called the restoration comedy of manners. And for the tragedies, we call them the restoration tragedies or restoration heroic tragedies. So for the comedies, a host of writers came to excel in their writing. They contributed a lot to the growth of dramatic output in dramatic literature in restoration period. And we may mention a few of their names. That is Etheredge, Parker, Vavru or Vanbrugh, and William Congreve. Actually, they basically wrote comedies, or you can say the restoration comedies of manners or comedy of manners. And for tragedy, you have Thomas Otway, whose famous writing is Venice Preserved, Thomas Otway, Nathaniel Lee, Elkanah Settle, etc., etc. So dramatic performances were there. It started again, but after the gap, so it was stopped in 1642. Again, it started in 1660 after the restoration. So in the meantime, there was a great change in attitude. So Charles II, who lived in France along with the other members, court members in France, they came uh, uh, they were living in France, so they were greatly influenced by the comedies uh, written in France. Actually, the comic performances which were doing well in France, which are prevalent then in France, actually left a kind of indelible impact on the courtiers and on the mind of the lords who are living there. So they were greatly influenced by the French comedies, French performances, namely the comedies of uh, Molière and Cornell. Okay, so when uh, dramatic performances started again in England, actually, uh, it accessed a great change in attitude, in the form of representation, both in form and in theme. Okay, so uh, with the restoration, British drama started enjoying a kind of liberty with the patronage of the king. The king gave them absolute liberty. So absolute liberty, you can say, uh, actually uh, guided uh, the dramatists or the contemporary uh, audience of the comedy of manners to um, a kind of a bit of wrong direction. So dramatic performances are there, but they were marked by a kind of licentiousness. There was licentiousness. That particular word should be explained. I think actually licentiousness is something which is lacking in decorum, lacking in uh, control. So there is a kind of dramatic performance where the dramatist lost uh, a bit of control while using language, while using some of the scenes. So obscenes were there, licentiousness were there, so lack of control or regularities were there in those dramas. So it's a kind of criticism. A kind of criticism is sometimes directed to the dramatic performances that restoration comedy of manners. Sometimes manners are marked by a degree of licentiousness, though it is a debatable issue. Some of the critics still opine that the epithet licentious is not altogether tenable or cannot be applied to them. So it is debated issue, but it is a charge sometimes leveled on them that dramatic performances included obscenity, licentiousness, etc., etc. So in that way, we are having the restoration comedy of manners and the playwrights like Etheridge, Farquhar, Congreve, and Vanbrugh. So this kind of drama continued to have its day. But what happened? The king was restored. He gave the dramatist liberty. The dramatic performances were brought back to the stage. So drama came to the stage again. But we must parallelly think of the middle class people. The middle class people, they actually boost the moral center, morality in the society. Okay, the upper class basically breaks the rule. The lower class also breaks the rule, but it is the middle class who uh, stick to a kind of stringent moral. So the middle class people did not like the representation of immorality and obscenity, coarse language, vulgar language, buffoonery on the stage. So what happened in 1698? The year is very important for the fate of Restoration Committee of Manners. What happened in 1698? So there was a clergyman, a priest, a man who is related to the service of church. That is Jeremy Collier. The clergyman is Jeremy Collier. Jeremy Collier published a pamphlet, and it was named A Short View on the Immorality and Profaneness on English Stage. So he attacked the Restoration Committee of Manners. He attacked the stage on the basis of the obscenity, licentiousness, immorality, profaneness. So the middle class people did not like such kind of coarse language used on the stage, and the obscenity. So the counter arguments were there. Some of the writers, actually Congreve himself wrote against the pamphlet written by Jeremy Collier, but the damage was done. So he made the attack, and the writers actually, they were alarmed. Well, what happened? Comedy of manners, writing comedy of manners stopped altogether. So in its place, another kind of drama called the sentimental plays started to be written. Okay, so another kind of drama emerged in the literary field, that is called sentimental plays. You might have heard the names of Cumberland, Kelly. So those writers were there, playwrights were there who composed sentimental plays. There you don't have the coarse language, the obscenity, the licentiousness, or the immoral sins, etc., etc. So with the performances of those plays, the sentimental comedies, actually the audience gradually became disinterested because those plays included melodramatic events. So the heroines were there, they were out and out virtuous. The heroes were there, they were honest, perfect fellows, banter, laughter, satire, funny episodes were not included. So the audience became bored with that kind of performances. Okay, so some of the dramatists now felt that the laughter which was prevalent in the comedy of manners, okay, which was seen, laughter which prevailed in the restoration comedy of manners should be brought back to the stage. So sentimental comedies filled the stage with tears. So a group of dramatists came to realize the fact that laughter or the comic episodes, the laughter should be brought back to the stage. So they again revived the comedy of manners, which is in literature, you can say the revival of comedy of manners, or you can also say it was a kind of reaction against the sentimental comedy. So those plays were called anti-sentimental comedies. So one thing they did with that kind of comedy, that is, they excluded the licentiousness of the restoration comedy of manners. So they brought a kind of refinement in their place. So coarse language, they abandoned using coarse language, obscenity. So restoration comedy of manners was revived, minus its licentiousness, minus its obscenity. So they gave a kind of refined touch to the comedy of manners. So that is primarily the history of the comedy of manners. So I think this kind of background may serve your purpose. Now, I'm not going to discuss any further the dramatic development. So that is the history of the origin of the comedy of manners. Now let's come directly to the Congreve's play, The Way of the World. Actually, Congreve is called a restoration dramatist, William Congreve. He was born in 1670, 1670, and died in 1729. So he was born in the neoclassical period. Okay, so what is the time range of neoclassical period? You know, from 1660 to 1780. This particular time range is called the neoclassical period. So, and particularly if you if you speak of the time range, chronological time range of the restoration period, then you can roughly assume that it is from 1660 to 1700. So almost for 40 years, it spans for almost 40 years from 1660 to 1700. So William Congreve is perhaps the most popular among the restoration comedy of manners writers. Okay, among the playwrights of that period, he was most popular. Actually, in the literary field, or basically a dramatist, I'm not going to say in details about his birth, about his upbringing, etc., etc. Just I'm concentrating on, focusing on his plays. Actually, he has a kind of, he had a kind of meteoric rise, rapid rise in the literary field. His first comedy was The Old Bachelor. So it was in 1693. Okay, The Old Bachelor. Next came in the same year, The Double Dealer. And in 1695, he published Love for Love, and in 1700, The Way of the World. He had his only tragedy, The Mourning Bride. It came out in 1697. So The Old Bachelor came out in 1693, The Double Dealer in 1693, Love for Love in 1695, and The Way of the World in 1700. Okay. Just a second. Now, uh, let us have a kind of discussion on the central theme of The Way of the World. So, in order to understand the motive, the central concern of that play, some of the texts which I think you have already read may help you. You have read Pope's The Rape of the Lock, where you have the characters, the Baileys and the View. It is Miss Arabella Farmo, Belinda, and the hero, that is Lord Peter. So you have known the world. You know the world, or you have read the poem, and the world that has been represented by Pope in that poem. So the comedy of manners, be it The Way of the World, or the Old Bachelor, or Double Dealer, or Goldsmith Stoops to Conquer, or the anti-sentimental playwright, that is Sheridan, Richard Brinsley Sheridan. His most famous play is The Rivals. So whatever it is, Restoration comedy of manners basically focuses on the life of the upper class aristocrats, whom we call the gentry, the landed gentry. They are either the landlords, the barons, or someone who is the possessor, owner of a vast estate. You have read Pride and Prejudice. There you have got the characters, that is Caroline Bingley and Fitzwilliam Darcy. The characters are there. They all have their estates. Okay, so those upper class aristocrats are landed gentry. That means they have their vast property. They are landed people, so they have their fixed income. Suppose a landed people, a landed gentry, or an aristocrat person who has his particular estate, and from that estate he has his fixed annual income. Suppose £20,000 a year or £50,000 a year. So they have their fixed income. That's why, as they have their fixed income, they need not think seriously about the maintenance of their households, their economic status, because they know that they have their certainty, economic certainty. They need not actually work for eking their livelihood. To gather their livelihood, they did not go for work. So what happened? the people belonging to that particular society, the upper class, the aristocrats, actually did not have any serious work in their life. So they had enough of time uh, mm, for engaging themselves in dilly-dallying, in unserious works, in love intrigues, uh, in what to say, scandal mongering, or engaging themselves in silly and shallow activities in their life. Actually, those unserious people refused to be involved in the serious activities of life. They paid little attention to education. They paid little attention to uh, the real pressures of life. So as they have their financial security, they actually lapsed themselves and they also became morally vulnerable. Okay, so let's come to the central story of the way of the world. So the manners comedy basically focuses on the life of the upper class aristocrats. Okay, now Congreve's the way world, the central story, the main theme uh, of the way of the world is uh, about Mirabel. Some characters are there. I am telling you the names of the characters. If there is any hero, then it is Mirabel. The name of the hero of this play is Mirabel. Okay, so Mirabel, the names are also significant. The names also bear their own meanings. Mirabel, the name Mirabel actually uh, means one who wants to be admired. Mirabel is a kind of hero who has thousands of lovers in the world he lives in the world he lives. Okay, and the next character is sorry. Mirabel is the hero. Actually, in this play, he is in love with Mrs. Milament. So Milament is the heroine. Another character is Mr. Fainall. So the name is also significant. Fainall means Fain means pretend. He always pretends. He always puts a kind of mask. Okay. Next character is Quitude. Quitude is a character actually who wants to be a kind of witty fellow, who pretends to be a kind of wit. Another character is petulant. Okay, who is peevish? Who is peevish? Petulant. Actually, they are Witwood and Petulant are the followers of Mrs. Milament. And next character is Sir Willful Witwood. Actually, Willful Witwood and Witwood, they are half brothers. Okay. Next character is Waitwell. Waitwell is a servant to Mirabel. So Mirabel's servant is Waitwell. So Waitwell, the name is also significant. One who waits well. Okay. So Waitwell is the servant to Mirabel. So these are the major male characters. Fainall, Mirabel, Witwood, Petulant, Sir Wilful Witwood, and Waitwell. Now the women characters are there. Lady Whisford. Now Lady Whisford is a middle-aged managing matron. Actually, she is a kind of enemy to Mirabel. Next comes Lady Whisford. Lady Whisford name is also significant. Whisford, the name Whisford means wish for it. That means he wishes to be beautiful. She wishes to have love. She wishes to be a young girl, though she is a middle-aged dame, middle-aged woman. Okay, so Lady Whisford is there. Next comes Mrs. Milament. I have already told you, Mrs. Milament. mm, she is in love with the hero, Mirabel. Next comes Mrs. Maroon. Mrs. Maroon is a friend to Mr. Fennel. Okay, Mrs. Maroon, if there is any villain, though not a villain in the true sense of the term, Mrs. Maroon, to a great extent, is villainous in nature, and her name suggests that Mar means destroy. Okay, so she wants to destroy the goodwill of others. Okay, the name is significant. She wants to destroy the goodwill of others. So Mrs. Marut is there, and Mrs. Fennel. Mrs. Fennel is a daughter to Lady Whisford. So Lady Whisford's daughter is Mrs. Fennel. Next comes Foible. Foible is a maid servant, as a woman to Lady Whisford. So Lady Whisford's servant, maid servant is Foible, and there is Mincing, another character, Mincing. Actually, she is a woman to Mrs. Milament. So Mrs. Milament's maid servant is Mincing. So these are the main characters of this play. Now, what is the central story? The central story is about Mirabel. How Mirabel would be married to Mrs. Milament. The main story of The Way of the World is the marriage between Mr. Mirabel and Mrs. Milament. When the play begins, some of the events have already taken place. Mirabel is a character who was actually in love with Mrs. Fennel. Okay. But he had not married Mrs. Fennel. Rather, Mirabel, actually, this kind of incident has already taken place before the play begins. Mirabel loved Miss Fennel, but when Miss Fennel, actually, whose actual name is Miss Arabella, when she suspected that she had been pregnant, when she doubted that she had been made pregnant by Mirabel, and told it to Mirabel, then Mirabel suggested her to get married to Mr. Fennel. Okay, he himself did not marry Miss Fennel. Rather, Mirabel encouraged Miss Fennel to get married to Mr. Fennel. So Miss Fennel is married to Mr. Fennel. Okay, so she becomes Mrs. Fennel. Miss Arabella becomes Mrs. Fennel. Though they are married, yet there is a kind of animosity, there is a kind of problem in their relationship. Okay, so leave that point apart. Now, coming to the main point, that is Mirabel somehow would be married to Milament. Now, what is the problem in their marriage? There is a problem. That is the main conflict in this play. As Mirabel wants to get married to Lady Whisford's niece, actually, Miss Milament is a ward of Lady Whisford. Okay, Lady Whisford is her aunt. If Mirabel if Milament, the heroine, wants to get married to any person, then she needs the permission of her aunt. If Miss Milament marries someone without the consent, without the permission of her aunt Lady Sport, then she would be deprived of her wealth amounting almost £6,000. So if she is married if she gets married to someone without the permission of her aunt, then she would lose £6,000. So there was a kind of legal bond in that way. So Mirabel wants to get married to Milament, but not without the permission of the aunt. So the permission of the aunt is required. So in order to have the desired permission to get married to Milament, Mirabel actually wants to make Lady Sport agree about their marriage. Okay, so Mirabel knows that Lady Whispered should be made happy. So she should be somehow pleased. So in order to please Lady Whispered, actually, he pretends to love her. The hero pretends to love the aunt of the heroine. Okay, so he pretends love for Lady Whispered, the middle-aged woman. Actually, he wants to get married to her niece. Okay, Miss Milament. But what happens? Lady Whispered gets fired. Why? Because there was the villainy done by Mrs. Maroon. Mrs. Maroon also loves Mirabel. She wants to get married to Mirabel, but Mirabel does not care for her love. So that is the cause of her anger. So Mrs. Maroon knows that Mirabel wants to get married to Mr. Mirabel wants to get married to Milament. Mr. Mirabel wants to get married to Milament, but she stands in the way. Somehow, she leaves no stone unturned. She tries every means to break the marriage. So Mrs. Maroon secretly informs Ladies for that the young man, Mr. Mirabel, is trying to mislead you. Actually, he loves your niece, Milament, and pretends to make love to you. So when she comes to know the truth, she is fired with anger and scolds him. Okay, so there is the initial break between Lady Whispered and Mirabel. So this incident takes place in the opening act. Actually, the play contains 5 acts. Now, as Mirabel is baffled, Mirabel fails in his attempt to appease Lady Whispered. He tries another plan. Now, what is the other plan? That is the that has been developed. His next plan, his first plan fails. Next, his next plan actually takes over the whole play. Okay, now what is his next plan? He actually chalks out a plan that Lady Whispered, he wants to get married to Milament, not without the consent of Lady Whispered. He should have, Mirabel should have the consent, should have the permission of Lady Whispered. So somehow the permission he should have from her by hook or crook, maybe possibly. Okay, so Lady Whispered may be somehow trapped. She must be put into a trap. Now, what is the trap? Actually, he makes a plan. What is the plan? Mirabel has his servant. This is Waitwell. Okay, so he asks his servant Waitwell to get married to Lady Whispered's servant, maid servant, that is Foible. Okay, so if his own servant Waitwell gets married to Foible, then Mr. Mirabel would be able to receive proper information what is happening in Lady Whispered's house. Number one. Number two, the second part of the plan is that Mirabel concocts a story, fabricates a lie. Actually, he asks his servant Waitwell to assume a disguise. Whose disguise? He actually he makes an imaginary uncle whose name is Sir Rolla. Actually, there is no real existence of Sir Rolla. Sir Rolla is he invents a fictitious character, fictitious uncle, imaginary uncle whose name is Sir Rolla. Actually, Mr. Roland is none but Mirabel's servant Waitwell. So now it is Mirabel's plan that he informs Foible to actually discuss something about Mr. Rolla before Lady Whispered. So Lady Whispered is informed about Mr. Rolla, the fictitious or imaginary uncle, who actually is sincerely in love, hobnobbing in love, deeply in love with Lady Whispered. So this kind of information should be imparted to Lady Whispered. So Lady Whispered is given the information that there is Mirabel's uncle, Sir Rolla, who is seriously in love with Lady Whispered, and Mirabel has no goodwill, he is not in a good relation with his uncle, Mr. Rolla. So Mr. Rolla is inimical to, or there is a kind of animosity, a kind of hostility between the uncle and the nephew, that is Mirabel and Rolla. So Lady Whispered also cherishes his love. The love, she also waits for the love of Sir Rolla. So what happens in the course of the play, we find that Mr. Rolla, that is the fictitious uncle of Mirabel, meets Lady Whispered, and they speak of marriage too. Okay, but there is a blot in the plan. The plan ultimately is on the verge of failure because of the intervention of Mrs. Maroon. So Mrs. Maroon actually begins to eavesdrop, begins to eavesdrop, and uh, from uh, behind the curtain, she happens to actually she happens to listen to the secret plan made by Mirabel and Mr. Oetwell. So Mrs. Maroon comes to know everything about the secret plan that they are trying to actually dupe, trying to uh, they are trying to uh, what to say, entrap Lady Sport um, in the form of a marriage. So Mrs. Marud goes to disclose the secret plan to Lady Sport. So she begins to report that she goes to report Lady Sport that I have seen uh, Hoable, that is your servant, talking with Mr. Mirabel. But uh, then Hoable somehow manages the situation. But afterwards, another exposure is there. So when Waitwell, the suitor to Lady Ford in the guise of the fictitious uncle, that is Mr. Rolla. So when Mr. Rolla, Mirabel's fictitious uncle, goes to marry Lady Ford, then Mrs. Marud again actually sends a letter to Lady Ford informing her that Mr. Rolla, the fictitious uncle, is no other than the servant of uh, Mr. Mirabel, and Lady Ford has been entrapped. She is going to be duped. Actually, there is a great conspiracy regarding her marriage. But the letter is also sincerely uh, intercepted by Fable. Fable intercepts the letter and it does not reach the hand of Lady Ford. So when the when Mrs. Marwood fails to reveal the plot through by sending the letter to Lady Ford, she herself in person goes to Lady Ford and exposes the fact that uh, Mr. Rolla is a great fraud. He is not Mirabel's uncle. There is no such man like Mr. Rolla. He is Mr. Fable. So when the exposure is done, Lady Ford is again uh, fired with anger and she drives away. She forces Fable to leave her job and her anger intensifies. So Mirabel, she decides that Mirabel will never be given the desired permission to get united to Milament. Now, there is a twist in the story. In such a situation, Mr. Fenol, Mr. Fenol intervenes. So Mr. Fenol, he is also great fraud. Okay, Mr. Fenol has married Mrs. Fenol, but behind her back, he loves Mrs. Maroon. Actually, Mr. Fenol, uh, he also makes a plan. What is his plan? He has actually he has organized his plan in such a way that Mr. Mirabel would be married to Milament without the consent of Lady Usford. So if Mirabel actually marries Milament without the consent of the aunt, then uh, Milament or Mirabel would lose £6,000 of a share. Okay, so he would be deprived of the wealth that has been preserved to reduce food, and secondly, Mr. Fennel, he comes to know from Mrs. Marut. From Mrs. Marut, Mr. Fennel comes to know that there was a kind of relationship between Mirabel and Miss Fennel before their marriage. So Mr. Mirabel is the previous lover, former lover of Miss Arabella or Miss Fennel. So there was a kind of relationship between them before their marriage. So Mr. Fennel now tries to blackmail Lady Whisford. Mr. Fennel now tries to blackmail Lady Whisford. So he proposes to Lady Whisford that you have to give me 6,000 pounds share, which actually belongs to Milament. So all the assets, all the property she has in her possession should be given to Fennel. So Fennel blackmails her. 6,000 pounds, number one. Number two, he also says that your daughter was engaged to someone, your daughter was in love with Mr. Mirabel before her marriage. So she is a woman of bad character. Now, if you don't give me all your wealth, if you don't transfer all your wealth in my name, then I will divorce your daughter. Okay, so Lady Sport then she is seriously bewildered. She is at a loss what to do. Somehow, if that story of our daughter's previous love, former love, is made public, then she would have her social transgressions, she would be socially disgraced. So in order to save her from social disgrace, social abomination, social transgression, she is ready to give all her wealth to Mr. Fennel. But Mirabel at this point intervenes and he promises that he would help her recover from that situation. So Mirabel intervenes. Actually, Milament was supposed to be married to Lady Whisford's nephew, whose name is Sir Wilful Whitwood. Actually, Sir Wilful Whitwood is a country baron. Okay, he is a country baron. He was asked to make love or court Milament. Somehow, she failed to please the heroine Milament. Actually, he is a great drunkard. Now, Mirabel and Milament, they come forward to manage the situation, and Milament happens to confess that I don't want to get married to Mirabel without your consent. I would like to marry the man you propose of your own choice. So I want to get married to Sir Wilful Whitwood. So Milament is getting married to Sir Wilful, so there is no question of giving away 6,000 pounds of a share. So 6,000 pounds of money is recovered. It is now made safe. And the second issue, that is all the possessions, all the property belonging to Lady Whisford should be given to Mr. Fennel. So this attempt should be foiled. This attempt should also be foiled somehow. So Mirabel intervenes in such a situation, and Mirabel says that the property which you have actually earlier what happened by some trick, playing some secret trick. Mr. Phenol has intercepted, swindled some of his property by playing false trick. So Mirabel, before uh, letting Miss Phenol marry Mr. Phenol, actually took some legal provisions because he suspected that Mr. Phenol, after marrying Miss Phenol, might do something wrong regarding the acquisition of property. So he actually took some cautionary steps. Mirabel and Miss Phenol took some cautionary steps so that Mr. Phenol actually fails to confiscate her wealth, because the world that has been represented in the way of the world is concerned with love, marriage, sex, and money. So money matters uh, there. Money is a most important factor in case of marriage. However, uh, Mr. Mirabel comes to the fore. He takes about this issue problem, and he brings his servant brings a black box, and when he opens the black box and takes out some paper, actually there it is. The legal sanction is there. Uh, Before marriage, Miss Fainall has already made sorry, Miss Fainall and Mirabel uh, had already taken some legal steps for the preservation of our property, and all her property was already uh, already given to Mirabel for uh, safekeeping. Okay, so all our wealth was written out to Mirabel. So if Mr. Fainall had played some trick for swindling her property, for confiscating her property, then uh, all his papers would be proved false. So in that case, Mr. Fainall's attempt of confiscating all the wealth is now fizzled out, ultimately fails. So Mirabel fails to have all the wealth, fails to have all the wealth belonging to Redisford. First of all, the £6,000 that was supposed to be given to him in case Milament marries Mirabel without her consent, and Miss Fenol's property has already been written out to Mirabel, so there is no scope of having her property now. So Mr. Fenol ultimately fails in all his plan, and there is no question, all his blackmailing attempt proves to be futile. So Mirabel is again fired with anger, he challenges Mr. Mirabel. Mr. Fainall is angered and he challenges Mr. Mirabel that he will see him later. Okay, he challenges him. And when everything is righted, Lady Whisford uh, actually succeeds in preserving her own wealth, and when Foible and Mirabel, both of them, each and every character begs mercy from her, then she becomes happy, she forgives everyone, and she agrees to give her niece's hand, Mirament's hand, in marriage to Mr. Mirabel. So there is a kind of happy ending. So if Mr. Fainall and if Mr. Fainall and Mrs. Maroon, if they are angry, and if they actually vow, take the vow to see them in the future, then what happens to them, or whether they would take some step against them, we don't know. But the play actually ends happily with the consent given by Lady Usford um, for the marriage between Mirabel and Milament. So that's the story. Now, one thing I should mention to you is that uh, Mr. Mirabel actually I am going to say you about the title of the play, The Way of the World. Actually, the phrase "Way of the World" has been uttered several times in the course of the text, in course of the play. Finally, it was told by in the last track. It was told by Mr. Fainall, the way of the world. Now, what is the way of the world? Actually, when Mincing and Fable come to Lady Usford, and they also expose the secret love affair between uh, the clandestine or the secret love affair between Mrs. Maroon and Mr. Fainall. Then also Mr. Fainall is not for the least ashamed. Okay, he is not ashamed of his own conduct, or ashamed of his own love affair, extramarital love affair with his Mrs. Maroon. Actually, his wife is Mrs. Fainall, but behind her back, he loves uh, Mrs. Maroon, and he wants to have all the property belonging to Lady Usford simply because of the fact that he wants to invest that wealth um, behind Mrs. Maroon. Okay, so when his clandestine, his scam, his scandal mongering, his love affair, extramarital love affair was exposed, then he was not ashamed. Rather, he confessed very boldly that that is the way of the world. That is the way of the world. That means this kind of activity, having extramarital love affair, having unfair relationship, having illegal or illicit relationship, or having more than one, having um, more than one wife, or this kind of love and sex related matters, extramarital matters, are very common in the society they live. Okay, so it is not uh, it is not an immoral activity. It is not very much it is not a simple act itself. So this kind of activity is very rare, very common, tolerable in the world they live. That's why uh, he says, or he utters the phrase, "This is the way of the world." So these are tolerable. Okay, if someone loves some other person's wife, if there is a kind of extramarital relationship, if there is a kind of relationship before marriage, these things are very common, tolerable in the world represented by Congreve. So that is the rough story. Actually, the story has been described in a complex way, but the main uh, story is about how Mirabel gets married to Milament with the consent of Lady Wishford. I think I have taken a lot of time. Now, the issues which are very important from this topic are actually the title. Okay, the title, significance of the title, or the meaning of the title, justification of the title of The Way of the World, and another issue that is also important is consider The Way of the World as a comedy of manners. Okay, so you have to say about the world, 18th century world, the upper class aristocratic society, and the lifestyle of the upper class landed gently. And the other issues from this topic, maybe. So significance of the title, it is one of the major important topics, and uh, you may be asked to say something about the character of Lady Whisford, and another question or another topic that may be set. Do you think the way of the world to be an artificial comedy? So our charge is very often leveled on this particular play by Congreve is that the world that has been represented in this play is artificial. So there is a kind of whirlpool of debate regarding this topic. Actually, Comedy of Manners, this play, the way of the world, particularly focuses on a particular sections of the society. Only the upper class people have been represented. The lower class or the middle class have been greatly avoided, have been deliberately avoided. So it, as it refers to a particular, it focuses on particular sections of the society, and uh, society, it is sometimes called, it is the critics often sometimes level a charge that it represents an artificial society. So it is also called artificial society, artificial comedy for some other reasons too. I'm not going to that discussion. So these are the topics: title, comedy of manners, consider it as an artificial comedy, and character of Lady Sport, and there may also be an issue, that is the treatment of the theme of sex antagonism in the way of the world. So these are the issues which are important for your um, exam purpose. I think with this we may end up this discussion. So if you have any question or any kind of query, you may put to me.
Thank you, sir, for such a exhaustive and well-designed lecture. I think students have been immensely benefited from this lecture, and students are encouraged to ask question. তোমাদের টেক্সট থেকে যদি কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকে টেক্সচুয়াল অ্যাসপেক্টে, কোনো জায়গা, কোনো প্যাসেজ, কোনো এরিয়া নিয়ে, তোমরা অবশ্যই কিন্তু স্যারকে জিজ্ঞেস করতে পারো আনমিউট করে, বা ইউ ক্যান অলসো পুট ইট ইন দ্য চ্যাট বক্স.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Sir, বলছি, after the publishing of the Way of the World, how much it was expected in the contemporary society regarding its moral value?
মানেই হয় না, আমি অনেকক্ষণ ভাবি কথাটা বলবো।
Yes, please tell me again. Actually, the reaction after the publication of this drama, performance of this drama, regarding the moral values.
Yes, sir.
Any other question? Any other question from any other student? I will answer all the questions. So I am giving answer to your question. So actually, when the drama was performed, the Way of the World performed, the initial reaction was adverse. when it was staged for the first time, actually, the way of the world was a grand failure, you can say. And so far as the issue of morality is concerned, actually, there was a kind of strong against reaction regarding the morality that has been represented by the characters in the play. Because what has been shown there in that particular play may seems to be immoral. So Mirabel is in love with uh, Miss Fennel, but subsequently she is suggested to get married to Mr. Fennel. So this kind of thing is morally shocking. So the lovers are not constant. So the practice they are making, uh, the practices are very unethical. So there was the moral issue, but Congreve actually the moral problems are there. Immorality was shown on the stage. It was attacked by the middle class people, but Congreve was on the side of morality. Actually, Congreve did not want to show immorality on the stage. Actually, he had the uh, not only Congreve, all the other neoclassical writers or the restoration writers, they tried to aim at correctness. They tried to preach morality in the society. You have read